the bare hands of Terra. Mission Log Earth Assessment, date 2453.7 Standard Galactic Time. Commander Nixus P. Lara, Galactic Combat Assessment Bureau. These humans are ridiculous, I announced to my assembled team, my forearms gesturing at the holographic display before us. Look at them. No claws, no venomous glands, no armored plates. Not even basic bioelectric defense mechanisms. How did they even survive long enough to develop spaceflight? My second-in-command, Senior Analyst Raxtel, bobbed his crystalline head in agreement. His voice chimed like wind through glass. Commander, preliminary scans show their bones are internal. They are essentially walking bags of liquid. Walking bags of liquid that somehow managed to qualify for Galactic Federation membership consideration, I reminded him, my tail twitching with annoyance. Which is why we are here, conducting this utterly wasteful assessment of their combat capabilities. The Beijing Combat Assessment Center loomed before us through the viewport of our shuttle, a surprisingly impressive structure of steel and glass reaching toward Earth's blue sky. At least they could build decent buildings. I had to give them that much. Commander Lieutenant Mira chattered through her mandibles. Their diplomatic liaison is approaching. Should I activate universal translation protocols? Yes, I waved one of my lower arms dismissively. Let's get this over with. 3 standard days to assess their combat capabilities, file our report, and get back to actual military matters. The human who approached our landing pad was tall for their species, though barely reaching my shoulder. Their skin was a warm brown tone, and they wore what I assumed was their formal military attire, a crisp blue uniform adorned with various metallic pins and badges. Commander P. Lara, the human's voice was surprisingly resonant. I'm General Rebecca Stone, United Earth Defense Force. Welcome to Earth. I performed the traditional 4-armed salute of my people. General Stone, we appreciate your world's cooperation with this assessment, though I must admit I have concerns about proceeding with combat evaluations of your species. The human's face did something fascinating. Their lips curved upward at the corners in what my xenobiology training identified as a smile, but this one seemed different from the diplomatic smiles we'd been shown in our briefings. This one had an edge to it. Concerns, Commander Stone asked. That strange smile still in place. Your species lacks any natural defensive or offensive capabilities, I stated bluntly. No biological weapons whatsoever. My preliminary report already notes serious concerns about your ability to contribute meaningfully to Galactic Federation defense initiatives. General Stone's smile grew wider. Commander P. Lara, would you be willing to make a small wager? My antenna twitched with interest. A wager? Yes, if, by the end of your 3-day assessment, you still believe humans lack meaningful combat capabilities, I'll personally recommend withdrawing our Federation application. I studied her carefully. And if I change my assessment? Then you'll owe me a drink at the closing ceremony. How utterly bizarre. Still, the confidence in her stance intrigued me. Very well, General. I accept your terms. Now, shall we proceed with the assessment protocols? Of course, Stone gestured toward the facility. Though I should warn you, Commander, we've prepared something special for your evaluation team. Something we call hand-to-hand combat. Hand-to-hand, I flexed my 4 hands meaningfully. General, I have twice as many hands as you do. How could that possibly be to your advantage? That strange smile appeared again. You'll see, Commander. You'll see the assessment center's main training hall was vast, its high ceiling dotted with floating holocams to record every angle of the upcoming demonstrations. My team spread out to set up our standard evaluation equipment while I consulted with General Stone about the protocols. Let me understand this correctly, I said, checking my datapad. You want to begin with something called sparring matches, without weapons? Exactly, Commander Stone replied, directing my attention to a group of humans entering the hall. These are some of our hand-to-hand combat instructors. They'll demonstrate various Earth martial arts styles. I noticed Lieutenant Mira trying to suppress her chittering laugh. General, she clicked, surely you jest. My species evolved from apex predators. We have natural armor and enhanced strength. Are you suggesting your soft-bodied instructors wish to engage in physical combat with us? A new human stepped forward, shorter than stone, with close-cropped silver hair and eyes that crinkled at the corners. That's exactly what we're suggesting. Name's Jack Harrison, United Earth Defense Force combat instructor. Behind me, I heard credits being exchanged as my alien assessment team started placing bets. Even the stoic Raxtel was getting in on the action, his crystalline form glinting as he wagered against the humans. Very well, I sighed, making a note in my report. Though I must advise against this. The Galactic Federation cannot be held responsible for any injuries that may. Commander Harrison interrupted, still smiling. How about we start with a simple demonstration? No contact, just showing some basic movements. Would that help ease your concerns? I gestured agreement with my upper right hand. Proceed. Harrison moved to the center of the training mat, accompanied by two other instructors, a powerfully built woman with dark skin and a lean man whose movements reminded me of Earth's feline predators. This is Master Sergeant Amara Jackson Harrison, indicated the woman, specializing in something we call Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And this is Thomas Kowalski, expert in Muay Thai. Fascinating names for fascinating wastes of time, Raxtel chimed in, his crystal surface reflecting the training hall's lights. Though I have placed 50 credits on the humans lasting at least 5 minutes against our combat specialists. Stone's lips twitched. Only 50? You might want to reconsider those odds, friend. Before Raxtel could respond, Harrison and his fellow instructors began moving through what they called forms. I had to admit, there was a certain fluid grace to their movements. Jackson demonstrated something called a throw using Kowalski's momentum against him. Harrison showed strikes that, while surely ineffective against armored opponents, displayed remarkable speed and precision. Interesting dance moves, Lieutenant Mira chittered, but hardly combat relevant against advanced species. That's when Jackson smiled, a predator's smile that made my antenna twitch. Why don't we make this more interesting? A friendly demonstration match, one of your team against one of ours. No weapons, no armor, just skill against skill. The betting pool among my team instantly doubled. Even some of the human observers were getting in on the action now, their confidence both amusing and puzzling. You understand, I said carefully, that my team includes members of the galaxy's most accomplished warrior races. The Vracnid, the Crystal Collective, the Serpentine Dominion. Perfect. Harrison clapped his hands together. More diverse opponents mean better demonstration opportunities. Unless, of course, you're worried about those Federation injury waivers. I felt my pride sting. Lieutenant Mira, since you seem so amused by all this, perhaps you'd like to demonstrate proper combat techniques to our hosts. Mira's mandibles clicked eagerly as she stepped forward, her chitinous armor gleaming. It would be my pleasure, Commander. Though perhaps we should have medical personnel standing by. For the humans, of course. Jackson stepped onto the mat, her bare feet silent against its surface. Don't worry about us. Worry about your bet with the General, Commander. Because after today, I think you'll be buying her that drink. More credits changed hands among the spectators. The holocams hummed, adjusting their positions. And I had the strangest feeling that we were about to learn something very important about these supposedly defenseless humans. Begin when ready, I announced, already composing the incident report in my head. This would certainly be quick, if nothing else. I had no idea how wrong I was. What happened next would forever change my understanding of combat potential. Lieutenant Mira, confident in her species' natural advantages, took an aggressive stance. Her 4 lower limbs spread wide for stability, mandibles flexing with anticipation. Against her, Jackson looked almost comically small and vulnerable. Last chance to withdraw, Mira chittered, her translator making the concern in her voice sound almost sincere. I would hate to damage such a promising diplomatic relationship. Jackson's response was simply to raise her hands in a ready position. Whenever you're ready. Mira launched forward with explosive speed, her natural armor plates gleaming under the lights. By all logical calculations, the match should have ended right there. A Vracnid strike carries enough force to dent reinforced steel. But Jackson wasn't there anymore. Moving with a fluidity that seemed to defy physics, the human instructor simply flowed around the attack. In the same motion, she gripped one of Mira's striking limbs, redirecting the lieutenant's momentum. Before anyone could process what was happening, my supposedly unstoppable warrior found herself airborne. The impact when Mira hit the mat echoed through the training hall. A collective gasp rose from my assessment team. That's impossible, Raxtel chimed, his crystalline surface flickering with shock. But Jackson wasn't finished. As Mira scrambled to regain her footing, the human moved in too close for the Vracnid's natural weapons to be effective. What followed was a masterclass in something Jackson called leverage and joint manipulation. Every time Mira tried to bring her superior strength and armor to bear, she found her own force being used against her. Within 2 minutes, my undefeated combat specialist was pinned, with her primary limbs immobilized in a hold that somehow negated all her natural advantages. "Do you yield?" Jackson asked calmly, maintaining the hold with seemingly minimal effort. Mira's translator crackled with a sound I'd never heard from her before, grudging respect. "I yield." The human gallery erupted in applause, while my assessment team stood in stunned silence. General Stone caught my eye and raised one eyebrow in a gesture I was beginning to recognize as friendly mockery. Commander Harrison stepped forward, grinning. "Would you like a detailed explanation of what just happened, or should we continue with the demonstrations?" "Both," I heard myself say, all 4 hands already typing frantically into my datapad. "And send in your next instructor. I want to see everything." The next demonstration featured Kowalski against one of my Serpentine officers. The human moved like water, his strikes targeting pressure points we didn't even know humans could identify. When the Serpentine warrior tried to use his species' famous constricting technique, Kowalski turned it into an opportunity for something he called a spinning elbow strike. "You see," Commander Harrison explained as we watched, "humans may lack natural weapons, but we've turned that into an advantage. We had to learn to use everything: leverage, momentum, anatomy, psychology. Each martial art represents generations of combat knowledge, refined and perfected." I watched, fascinated, as he pointed out the different styles. The way Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu turned ground fighting into an art form. How Muay Thai transformed the entire body into a weapon. The precision of pressure point strikes, the brutal efficiency of military combat techniques. "But how?" I asked, genuinely curious now. "Your species is so fragile." Stone joined us, that knowing smile still playing on her lips. "Commander, being fragile taught us to be clever. Being weaker taught us to be skilled. Having no natural weapons taught us to turn everything into a weapon, even empty hands." The demonstration continued with a new instructor entering the mat, a red-haired human female who moved with predatory grace. Alexandra Blackwood, Stone introduced her. Special Forces hand-to-hand combat specialist. Blackwood faced off against 3 of my team members simultaneously. What followed was nothing short of revolutionary. She seemed to anticipate their moves before they made them, turning their attacks against each other. A Vracnid charge became a throw that knocked down a Crystal Collective warrior. A Serpentine strike was redirected into thin air. "This is what you meant," I realized, watching Blackwood systematically dismantle my team's preconceptions about combat. "When you said we'd see. Humans had to become good at fighting without relying on natural weapons," Stone explained. "We had to learn to read body language, to understand the physics of movement, to turn an opponent's strength into a weakness. What you're seeing isn't just physical combat, it's the culmination of thousands of years of human innovation and adaptation." The betting pool had gone silent. My team watched with a mixture of awe and growing concern as Blackwood finished her demonstration by simultaneously submitting 2 opponents while evading the third. "I believe," I said slowly, my antenna twitching with excitement, "that my initial assessment may have been premature." Stone's smile widened. "Commander, we haven't even shown you our advanced techniques yet. Would you like to see what happens when we combine these traditional arts with modern combat analysis and enhancement training?" I looked at my datapad, then at the time display. We still had most of our assessment period remaining, and I had a feeling we were about to witness something unprecedented in Galactic Federation combat history. "Show me everything," I said, pulling up a fresh report template. "And General? I believe I'm going to owe you that drink." As the demonstrations concluded, an unexpected voice rang out from the back of my assessment team. "This proves nothing. These were merely training exercises. The speaker was Major Crux, a towering representative of the Titan Collective. His metallic scales caught the light as he pushed through the crowd. Behind him, two more of my most formidable team members stepped forward: Commander SCIFI of the Shadow Reach and Battlemaster Orion from the Nova Guard. "We challenge the humans to real combat," Crux announced, his voice resonating through the training hall. "No more demonstrations, no more staged performances. 3 of us against 3 of your best." I started to intervene, but General Stone raised her hand. "We accept." "General," I hissed through my translator, "this is highly irregular. The assessment protocols will give us perfect data on actual combat scenarios," she finished, that confident smile never leaving her face. "Trust me, Commander Pilara. You wanted to see everything? This is everything." Stone turned to Harrison, who was already using his communication device. "Get me Thompson, Reyes, and O'Connor. Tell them the gloves are coming off." The next hour was a flurry of activity. Medical teams were put on standby, though whether for the aliens or humans, I wasn't sure anymore. The betting pool, which had gone quiet during the demonstrations, exploded with new wagers. Even some of the cleaning staff were placing bets now. The first human champion arrived like a thunderstorm given form. Marcus Thompson stood 2 meters tall, his dark skin gleaming with a thin sheen of sweat from what he called his warm-up routine. His movements were deliberate, controlled, yet carried an undercurrent of explosive power. "That one's mine," Crux declared, sizing up Thompson. "I want to test human strength against Titan might." Thompson just smiled and continued his stretching. Lucia Reyes entered next, her compact frame moving with the fluid grace of a predator. She wore simple training gear, her black hair tied back severely. Her eyes scanned the room, analyzing, calculating. Commander SCIFI's shadow-touched skin rippled with interest. "The small one is my prey," SCIFI purred, her species' natural camouflage flickering with anticipation. "Interesting choice of words," Reyes responded, her voice carrying an edge that made my antenna twitch. The final human warrior's entrance was so understated I almost missed it. David O'Connor looked more like a scholar than a fighter, with gentle eyes and precisely combed brown hair. He carried himself with a stillness that somehow made him more noticeable than if he'd been moving. Battlemaster Orion, resplendent in his bio-augmented armor, laughed. This is their champion." O'Connor said nothing, but his slight smile reminded me uncomfortably of a surgical laser. Commander Pilara Stone called my attention away from the gathering warriors. "Would you like to set the rules for these matches?" I consulted my datapad, trying to find protocol for this unprecedented situation. 3 individual matches. Victory by submission or referee stoppage. No lethal force. I paused, then added, no permanent damage to diplomatic relations. Harrison stepped forward to address the combatants. "We'll begin with Crux versus Thompson, followed by SCIFI against Reyes, and finally Orion facing O'Connor. Standard safety protocols apply. Tap out or verbal submission will end the match immediately." While the first pairs prepared, I observed their pre-fight routines with growing fascination. Crux performed the traditional Titan battle meditation, his scales shifting through patterns of intimidation. Thompson, by contrast, simply rolled his shoulders and bounced lightly on his feet, looking for all the world like he was preparing for a casual exercise session rather than combat with a being twice his mass. "Betting closes in 5 minutes," announced one of my junior analysts, who had somehow become the unofficial bookkeeper. Current odds heavily favor the alien champions, though human odds have shortened considerably after the demonstrations. Reyes was going through a complex series of movements that seemed to flow into each other like water. Nearby, SCIFI's form became increasingly difficult to track as she activated her species' natural camouflage abilities. The air around her rippled like heat waves rising from hot ground. O'Connor sat in perfect stillness, eyes closed, breathing steady. Battlemaster Orion paced nearby, his augmented armor humming with barely contained energy. The contrast between them was almost comical, like comparing a meditation garden to a warship. "General Stone," I said quietly, "your warriors understand what they're facing. Crux can shatter reinforced walls with a single strike. SCIFI can become nearly invisible and has toxic secretions. Orion's armor makes him practically invulnerable to unaugmented attacks. Stone's response was interrupted by Harrison's voice. First match starting in 60 seconds. Clear the combat area. Commander Stone finally answered, "Would you like to place a bet before the window closes?" I looked at my datapad, at the humans preparing for seemingly impossible battles, at my own warriors bristling with natural weapons and augmented abilities. Then I looked at Stone's unwavering confidence. 20,000 credits, I said, mandibles clicking in resignation. On the humans. Stone's eyebrows rose. Not exactly an unbiased assessment official anymore, are you? Let's just say my preliminary findings suggest humanity might be more combat capable than initially reported. The lighting in the training hall dimmed, spotlights focusing on the central mat. Thompson and Crux took their positions. The tension in the room built like a power core approaching critical mass. "Begin on the tone," Harrison announced. "May the best warrior win." I activated all my recording devices and sensory inputs. Whatever happened next, I had a feeling the Galactic Combat Assessment Bureau's combat doctrine was about to need significant revision. The tone sounded, and history began to write itself. The first match began exactly as I expected. Crux charged forward with planet-cracking force, his metallic scales gleaming as he launched a strike that could shatter battle armor. Thompson, displaying either incredible bravery or complete insanity, stepped toward the attack instead of away. What happened next defied every combat analysis program in my database. Thompson slipped inside Crux's guard, his movement so precise it looked almost casual. Before the Titan warrior could redirect his momentum, Thompson had secured a grip on his arm. What followed was a masterpiece of biomechanical manipulation. "This is called leverage," Harrison commented from beside me, as Thompson used Crux's own weight and momentum to send him flying. Notice how he's not trying to match strength with strength. The impact of Crux hitting the mat rattled my teeth. The Titan warrior rolled back to his feet, scales bristling with rage and confusion. Impossible. You cannot throw a Titan. Thompson's response was a combination of strikes targeting joints and pressure points that my sensors could barely track. Each hit flowed into the next, never staying still enough for Crux's superior strength to come into play. It was like watching water wear away stone. "Your warrior fights without honor," Crux roared after another failed attempt to grapple. "No," Thompson replied, ducking under a swing that would have decapitated a less skilled fighter. "I fight with technique. There's a difference." The end came suddenly. Crux, frustrated by his inability to land a solid hit, overcommitted to a crushing blow. Thompson turned the Titan's charge into a devastating throw, transitioning smoothly into a joint lock that somehow found weakness in seemingly impervious armor. Crux's tap-out echoed through the stunned silence. As medics checked both fighters, Silpha and Reyes took their positions. The air around Silpha rippled as she engaged her active camouflage, becoming a barely visible distortion in the air. "Commander," one of my analysts whispered, "how can the human fight what she cannot see?" Reyes answered that question by closing her eyes. "Watch carefully," Stone murmured. "This is where it gets interesting." Silpha struck from seeming invisibility, her toxic secretions ready to end the fight with a single touch. But Reyes moved like she had eyes in the back of her head, evading with minimal movement. She wasn't trying to see her opponent, she was listening, feeling the air currents, reading the subtle shifts in the mat beneath her feet. "What you're watching," Harrison explained as Reyes countered another invisible attack, "is the result of blindfolded training. When you can't rely on sight, you develop other ways to track an opponent." Silpha's growing frustration became evident in her increasingly aggressive attacks. Each miss was met with a precise counter that forced her to retreat. Reyes moved in an expanding spiral, her footwork subtly limiting Silpha's maneuvering space. "She's hunting the hunter," I realized, watching the human gradually control the battlefield. Even with advanced camouflage, Silpha's still bound by physics. She still makes sound, displaces air, creates pressure on the mat. The end came in a blur of motion. Silpha, trying to finish the fight, committed to a full assault. Reyes dropped and rolled, catching her opponent mid-strike. The next few seconds were a complex grappling sequence that ended with SCIFI, now fully visible, trapped in a submission hold that somehow neutralized her toxic secretions. "Yield," SCIFI gasped, genuine respect in her voice. "I yield to superior skill." As the medical team confirmed no toxic exposure, O'Connor and Battlemaster Orion took their positions. The contrast was almost comical. O'Connor in simple training clothes, Orion in his gleaming bio-augmented armor. "Still time to forfeit," little human Orion's synthesized voice boomed. "My armor can enhance my strength tenfold and predict attack patterns." O'Connor's response was purely practical. "Interesting. Does it account for this?" What followed was perhaps the most elegant dismantling of a superior force I've ever witnessed. O'Connor moved like he could read Orion's attacks before they began, using the Battlemaster's augmented strength against him. Every predicted attack pattern became a trap, every enhancement a vulnerability. "The armor's making him predictable," Stone explained, watching O'Connor systematically shut down Orion's options. "It's processing everything through combat algorithms. But human adaptability doesn't follow standard patterns." O'Connor proved this by constantly changing styles. One moment he used direct force against force techniques, the next fluid evasions, then suddenly switched to grappling. Orion's combat computer couldn't keep up with the constant tactical shifts. Impossible. Orion's frustration was evident as another attack sequence failed. "The armor's computation matrix cannot be this wrong." "That's the problem," O'Connor said, slipping past another augmented strike. "You're fighting with a computer. I'm fighting with experience." The finishing sequence was a work of art. O'Connor used Orion's own enhanced strength to overload key joints in the armor, creating a cascade of system failures. The Battlemaster found himself locked in a position where his augmentations actually worked against him, amplifying the submission hold rather than breaking it. "Your armor is very impressive," O'Connor commented as Orion struggled uselessly. "But it's still just a tool, and a tool is only as good as its user's understanding." The tap-out was more of a crash as Orion's armor systems finally overloaded. As the medical teams rushed in and my analysts frantically updated their combat databases, I looked at General Stone. "I believe I now understand why you were so confident." She smiled. "Commander, what you've seen today isn't just about physical combat. It's about human adaptability. We turned our weaknesses into strengths, our limitations into advantages. Every martial art you've witnessed represents thousands of years of humans asking one simple question. How do we win when we're not the strongest?" I watched as the fighters congratulated each other, shared techniques, and even started making plans to train together. Already the boundaries between species were breaking down in the face of shared respect for skill and dedication. "I believe," I said, making notes for my final report, "that the Galactic Federation's combat doctrine may need significant revision, particularly the sections about natural advantages versus trained capabilities." "And the human's qualification for membership?" Stone asked. I looked at my datapad, then at the scene before me. "I think," I said slowly, "that the real question is whether the Federation is qualified for Humanity Final Assessment Report Earth Combat Capabilities." Commander Nixus P. Lara, Galactic Combat Assessment Bureau. Date 2453.10 Standard Galactic Time. Computer, begin recording final assessment notes. I spoke, nursing the curious Earth beverage. General Stone had introduced me to something called a martini, and marked this report as priority viewing for the Federation Defense Council. The closing ceremony was in full swing around me. In one corner, Thompson was teaching crooks about something called wrestling fundamentals. The Titan warrior, his scales still bearing scuff marks from their match, was listening with unprecedented attention. Initial assumptions regarding human combat capabilities where I paused, watching Reyes demonstrate a blindfolded evasion technique to an amazed group of alien observers, drastically incorrect. Nearby, O'Connor and Battlemaster Orion were deep in discussion about the integration of traditional martial arts with modern combat systems. Orion's armor was still making occasional sparking sounds. Humanity's lack of natural weapons has driven them to develop combat techniques that transcend conventional military doctrine. Their martial arts are not merely fighting systems, but comprehensive studies in the application of physics, psychology, and tactical adaptation. I took another sip of the martini, understanding now why Stone had wagered this particular drink. Like humanity itself, it was deceptively potent. Furthermore, the humans have demonstrated an unprecedented ability to analyze and counter superior physical capabilities. Their techniques effectively neutralize natural advantages such as armor, enhanced strength, and even advanced technological systems. Lieutenant Mira chittered past, engaged in animated discussion with Jackson about joint manipulation principles. My formerly confident combat specialist was now taking notes on her datapad. This assessment recommends immediate revision of Federation combat training protocols to incorporate human martial arts principles. Additionally, I watched as a group of my analysts exchanged contact information with the human instructors. I strongly advise establishing permanent exchange programs for combat training. General Stone approached my table, another martini in hand. Working on your final report, Commander. Indeed, though I admit, finding the right words to explain how your species managed to overcome every natural advantage we possess is challenging. She laughed. Maybe you're still thinking about it wrong. You see natural weapons as advantages. We see their absence as an opportunity for innovation. Computer, add quote to report, I commanded. Then, to Stone, that perfectly encapsulates what we witnessed here. Your species turned disadvantage into opportunity, weakness into strength. And now she asked, gesturing to the mingling crowd of humans and aliens, all sharing techniques and stories. And now I have to explain to the Federation Defense Council why they should be more worried about humans with empty hands than warriors with natural weapons. I flexed all four arms in amusement. No pressure. Just tell them what you saw, Stone suggested, and maybe mention how a species they dismissed as defenseless managed to completely rewrite their understanding of combat in 3 days. Oh, I will, along with a strong recommendation to fast-track Earth's Federation membership. After all, I raise my glass in a toast. Any species that can turn their greatest weakness into their greatest strength is someone I want as an ally, not a potential adversary. Speaking of allies, Stone nodded toward where Raxtel was attempting to recreate a human fighting stance, his crystalline form glinting with effort. I believe your team has already started building those bridges. Computer, final notes, I announced. In conclusion, the human practice of martial arts represents more than just combat techniques. It embodies their species' core strengths, adaptability, innovation, and the determination to overcome seemingly insurmountable obstacles. I watched as Harrison corrected Raxtel's stance, the Crystal Warrior's initial disdain now replaced with earnest concentration. Furthermore, their willingness to share these techniques demonstrates a diplomatic potential equal to their combat capabilities. Earth's inclusion in the Federation would significantly enhance our collective defensive capabilities. While their training methods could revolutionize our approach to combat preparation. Stone raised an eyebrow. That's quite an endorsement, Commander. Well, I finished my martini. I did lose our bet quite thoroughly. The least I can do is ensure the Federation understands exactly what humanity brings to the galaxy. Computer, final addendum. I stood, slightly unsteady from the Earth beverage, and raised my voice to address the gathered crowd. Let the record show that this assessment concludes with one vital recommendation to all spacefaring species: never, ever underestimate a species just because they look soft and squishy, especially if they've spent their entire history figuring out how to win fights without natural weapons. The room erupted in laughter and applause. As I watched humans and aliens alike sharing techniques, stories, and mutual respect, I couldn't help but think that this assessment had achieved something far more valuable than combat evaluation. Computer, end recording, I commanded, and General Stone, I believe I owe you another drink. Actually, she smiled. I think this rounds on the Federation. After all, they're the ones who just got the galaxy's best combat instructors as new members. Looking at the scene before me, I couldn't disagree. The galaxy was about to learn what I had discovered: sometimes the most dangerous weapon isn't claws, armor, or advanced technology. Sometimes, it's just a pair of empty hands and the knowledge of how to use them.